Welcome to the Power of Peacefulness podcast. Today, we have an expert guest. She's a psychiatrist, and she's going to be talking to us about bringing peace into our lives. I can't wait for you to listen to Dr. Jeannie Lawrence. Speaking about mental health and emotional well-being, I want you to know that I have a new journal that's out. You can find it at Amazon or in our show notes. It's all about journal prompts. So if you haven't journaled before, try it. All you need is a pen and a pad. If you need some help, you may want to purchase my book with journal prompts. It'll give you an idea of what to work on. But just that idea of sitting down, getting your thoughts out on paper makes a tremendous difference. If you like this podcast, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who can benefit from it. All right, let's get started. Today we have Dr. Jeannie Lawrence, a psychiatrist. Thanks so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and just being who you are, because I love the fact that you're out there helping women with their emotional well-being. It's so important. I think it's priceless.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been following you for years and in your groups for years, and it's such an honor and a treat to be able to sit down and chat with you face to face. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. How did you get into psychiatry? Tell us. There must have been something in your life that occurred, or that maybe during your medical student years, you saw something that you gravitated towards psychiatry. What was that?
Yeah, let's see. I really like to say that I didn't choose psychiatry. Psychiatry chose me. I, going into med school, didn't even know that psychiatry was a medical specialty that was an option or available to me. And I actually remember as a pre-med student, touring the campus with one of our deans who happened to be a psychiatrist, and leaning over and saying, "Hey, I didn't know like psychiatrists were medical doctors." And so she was really gracious at that goofy comment that I made to tell me that, yeah, actually, I'm a psychiatrist and you can be a psychiatrist, and it totally is a medical specialty. So I didn't go in with any thoughts about becoming a psychiatrist. Psychiatry was my last or second to last rotation as a med student as we were going through all the major specialties. And so I liked everything pretty well up to that point. But when I got to my psychiatry rotation, it was just kind of hand in glove. I was very comfortable with the patients and being on the unit, and kind of fascinated with what at that time seemed like these very dramatic turnarounds when you see a person who's on an inpatient unit like leave and be kind of restored to health. And so it was just hand in glove. And I felt like I had found my place in medicine. And I went with that. I always like to tell the story that I had some opposition. My family also didn't know about psychiatry. There's lots of stigma, of course, around mental health. I even had my internal medicine attending tell me to not go into psychiatry. And so there was definitely some opposition there, but I really listened to myself in that moment, and I'm really glad that I did. It was absolutely the right choice for me.
Jeannie, we'll move on, but I do have to point out, it's so sad about the mental stigma. It's so sad that you want to help people, that this is what you feel like your calling is, and for people to denounce that or say, no, go do something different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. This was many years ago, and I'm glad that things are starting, like more conversations like this, podcasts like this, et cetera, are coming out where some of the stigma is being released. But definitely back then, it was not a popular choice, and very sad indeed. But I'm glad that we're making progress at least.
Tell us about the jump to, or the transition to women, the high functioning women for emotional well-being. I can tell you myself, I definitely have nervous dysregulation. I'm all over the place a lot of times. I feel like I'm always go, go, go. I can't stop. And you're treating me. You're treating the woman out there like me. How did you move into this?
Yeah. So I guess my transition into working with women and high functioning women specifically started with my own story. When I graduated residency, that was a big deal. Of course, I was the first physician in my family. And so everybody was very proud of me. And then within a couple of months of graduating, I also got married. So that was another big milestone. I moved from my little tiny apartment to a big house. So lots of transitions and like things that I've been hoping and working for many years were coming together. I had kind of arrived, is what I felt like after many years. And that was a very happy time. But after I kind of settled into my new life, I started to realized that I had a lot of pressure on myself. And a lot of it was me thinking that I had to continue to be like that A+ student who was kind of and the good girl, like that was always like doing the right thing and making the good grades. And again, becoming the first physician in my family, I felt like I had to maintain that very high standard that I had. And that I thought people had for me. And I couldn't, right? It was a different stage in life. It was a lot of change and transition. I didn't have a lot of support in these new roles. I was the only doctor at my site and working with a lot of sick patients, et cetera. And so I felt like I had a lot of pressure to perform basically and keep up that expectation, and felt like I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I felt like, again, this was a happy time. And so like I should present as being very happy about it, even if I was struggling inside. And so I think that led to a lot of, a lot of emotions, right, that I was trying to deal with and navigate on my own, and didn't really have the tools for, even though I was a psychiatrist. I didn't have the tools. I didn't apply any tools like that to myself. I didn't see myself the same way that I saw my patients and the people that I worked with. And so I floundered for a while and tried therapy, and, that had its place in my life. But what was really transformational for me, I remember I was taking a walk one day, and I was listening to a self-help podcast, and I was upset about something. And I remember a light bulb went off, and I realized that in my frustration, anger, whatever emotion I was feeling at the moment, that there were words and thoughts going through my mind at the same time. I think until that point, all I did was kind of feel things and react to things without really having the wherewithal to think about what I was thinking about, right? And how that was impacting the way I was feeling. But when I made that connection, that was a light bulb moment for me. And I became empowered because I realized that a lot of my suffering that I was trying to fix by taking more action, right, and fixing things like we do in medicine, all I really needed to do was to look within and to start to see how my own brain was contributing to the way I was feeling. So that was really empowering for me. It was a turning point for me and really started a real transformation and self-growth journey. And then from there, things just kind of moved in a really awesome direction. I started blogging because I was so excited about the changes that were happening in my life. And I started sharing that blog online and with women physicians and in groups that I was in. This was like around 2020. And I started seeing that women physicians really resonated with it. A couple of things were happening in 2020, right? There was the pandemic. So me blogging about mental health and well-being was a way to try to contribute to the world in some way, like by sharing my insights on those subjects, because everybody was obviously struggling a lot with mental health and well-being. But also it was a time where physicians were struggling, especially because of being the front lines and, dealing with this pandemic. And so anyway, it seemed like a really good place for me to be able to help the world in some way. And women physicians had given to me so much, like I had started thinking about business, and my first coaches are women physicians. The first people who gave me opportunities to be on podcasts like this one were women physicians like you. And so when I was sitting down thinking about, who I would most love to work with, it was women physicians. And so anyway, that's how I got here, my own transformation, and then deciding who I really wanted to serve.
From an entrepreneurial point of view, it is always the people that you can resonate with. Like, it's your story, right?
Yeah.
So you can tell it best and help them the best. You mentioned society norms, or what I call society norms, as far as like, from the outside, everything looks perfect, right? You have the desirable life. You're a physician. You're making good money. You have the family. You should have everything. And how could you question that? How could you have some reserves? And I believe like society doesn't get it. It's really, and that in itself causes stress. I know I've spoken about this before, but when I wanted to leave medicine, my husband was like, he didn't understand, and he was my best friend. And I was like, wow, if he doesn't understand, my sisters didn't understand. It's a really hard thing. So I loved your story when you're talking about like your light bulb moment, when you're walking and you listen to a podcast and you had that transformational moment, or something just hit you, the light bulb went off. I love it. I think it's something we can all relate to.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Talking about some tools, tell us whether it's women out there or whether women physicians or other women just stressed out. This podcast is The Power of Peacefulness, all about bringing peace into your life. Tell us some tools that we can use and start using today, actually.
Yeah. So one of my favorite tools to use is something that we always have with us. It's always accessible, and it's our breath. Um, I really love the power of taking a moment, taking your hand, putting it on your heart, right, skin to skin, because that releases oxytocin, like increases that calming effect, and then just taking a deep breath in through your nose, and then a long, long exhale through your mouth. That extra long exhale kind of activates our parasympathetic nervous system. That really brings an additional calm. And then the hand on the heart also is being really intentional that, you know what, I'm taking a pause. Everything is crazy around me, right? And that's okay, but I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to connect with my body and myself and take a breath. And you can do that. That's something you can do anywhere, literally anywhere at any time, to bring a bit more peace to a busy day as well.
Jeannie, we had spoken a little before the podcast. You also mentioning, which really stuck out to me, that question about don't ask what's wrong with me. Because I know I do this and I know other women do this. What's wrong with me? Why don't I get this? Why am I like this? Instead, you propose that question, ask what's right with you. So tell us a little about that. That really just touched my heart.
Yeah. You're right. That's such a common question and a common refrain. And I've asked it of myself many times. And almost every woman physician that I interact with has that question in the back of her mind, like, what's wrong with me, And I find that question is very disempowering. It kind of keeps a bit of like self-judgment and shame and I know people are trying to just get an explanation for like why they feel the way they do, but it comes from a place of feeling ashamed about why they're dealing with what they're dealing with. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I find that a much more powerful question to start with is what's right with me. I'll give you an example. So I'm working with a woman physician who has struggled with anxiety her whole life, meds and therapy, and still with all of that, just coping, just kind of head above water, definitely thriving when we first started working together. And naturally, one of her questions around her feelings of anxiety at work and in her life was, what's wrong with me? Why am I so anxious all the time? And she felt bad, right? She felt bad about feeling so anxious. But when we kind of talked about it and uncovered it, it turned out like in her work, for example, where she was always trying to, excel and exceed expectations and work really hard. And that was anxiety producing for her. But underneath that was a really beautiful value that she had, which was to take care of patients, like at the very highest level, and to love people. She's a very loving, caring doctor, which is something so beautiful about her. And if she wasn't a loving, caring doctor, right, she wouldn't have the pressure on herself that she does, and she wouldn't be so anxious. So my point is that her anxiety, which is something that she felt a lot of shame about, was actually a clue into something that was really beautiful about her. And uncovering that became a really powerful place to then start to make some changes so that she could keep that value of loving her patients and caring about her patients, but do it in a way that that served her a bit better. But I find that change really comes much more easily, like when we're embracing ourselves and compassionate and understand what's beautiful underneath the surface. So that's why I asked the question.
Beautiful. And the other question that you asked that really took me back was how we need to slow down to speed up. And I can resonate with this totally because I'm always go, go, go. And it gets to the point where I'm no longer productive. I am doing things half-assed because I feel this rush to get it done and I just want it off my plate. And when I do rest, I love the weekends. Honestly, like I work with people and I say, really need the weekends to myself. I do. It is my break. I don't think I could be as productive during the week unless I take those 2 days where I can get up in the morning and there's nothing. We have plans, but It's to slow down. It's like what I call a mind lull, just slowing down. So talk to us a little about that.
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of women, I know a lot of women, myself included, can certainly relate to go, 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 action, action, action. When I think about um medicine and women physicians, like that's kind of like the culture. Like, everything is about staying in motion, checking the boxes and being in action all the time. And you're right. Like we do, that serves us in some ways, but we must take that time to rest and relax and slow down. Because if you keep it's like a car that you never get serviced, right? Like it can go really fast for a while, but if you never change the oil and never change the tires, eventually the car's not going to run very well. You have to take those pit stops, right? To so that you can stay in momentum. And so, yeah, whether it's the weekend or even, bits and pieces throughout the day, I think slowing down is really important to be able to, as an ambitious woman, right, to continue to work at the level that we desire. I also think of slowing down to speed up in terms of our emotional health and well-being. So if you kind of imagine that we all are born with like this invisible backpack, right? And as we go through life, right, as we experience things that are disappointing or hurtful or traumatic, we put stones in our back, right? Each of those upsets is like another stone in our backpack. And we can walk with the backpack full of hurts and things like that for a while, but the more you put in there, right, the heavier it gets and it's going to slow you down. And so, um, taking time to unpack that sometimes, it's the same way as you relax on the weekend. You have to do that with your emotional health as well. You can't always be go, 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 ignore your emotions forever. At some points, we have to unpack what's going on underneath the surface to release that so that we can get back into motion and move on towards our goals and dreams at the highest level that we can.
Jeannie, thanks for these three tips. Just to summarize, it's about our breath.
Mhm.
So go back and listen to that if you're forgetting about the breath. And then number two is always just ask what is right with me. And then number three is slowing down to speed up. I love this talk. Thank you so much. Where can people get a hold of you if they want more information?
Sure. You can come to my website. It's www.jeannielawrencemd.com/sanctuary is where you'll find the bulk of my work and the work that I do with women physicians in terms of life coaching. I'm also pretty active on Instagram and LinkedIn under my name as well, Dr. Jeannie Lawrence MD.
Jeannie, you had mentioned earlier when we were speaking, you have a free resource for our listeners out there. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I would love to share with your listeners my free resource. It's a guide that I created called How to Have a Great Day, even if you're busy, overwhelmed, and have a million things to do. So this really speaks to all of our high functioning professional women who are listening, who I know have a million things on your to-do list, but you still can have a beautiful and peaceful day. And I show you in a free guide. So on my website, again, jeannielawrencemd.com, you'll see a pop-up or your email and send it right over.
Jeannie, thanks so much for being here. Dr. Lawrence, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.